Welcome to the Lion-Hearted Podcast, where courage meets purpose, and every conversation is an opportunity to inspire and ignite the lion heart within all of us. I'm Dr. Steve Rasner, your host, and today we have a really special guest that I'm really excited that he's joined me. I've had some pretty powerful people on this show in all walks. Had Mike Picos, couldn't be a more well-known oral surgeon. Bill Strupp, David Yang. Well, the next guest I have, I've known, I guess we'll get into it, about 20 years. And he's not going to be a name you don't know. It's a very well-known name. His name is Dr. Paul Goodman. Paul, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Steve. Excited to talk with you. You've inspired me I think we're close to 20 years. We can talk about that first meeting along the way.
Yeah, I have known Paul for 20 years. Tell us how we first met.
I was running a study club. It really was the inspiration for what I do now in Philadelphia. It's called the Rising Dentist Study Club of Philadelphia. My goal was if we could get dentists together earlier in their career, they would get along, they wouldn't fight later. So I would do a yearly seed course, and I got up this money. I said, okay, I've got a few sponsors. It was at Maggiano's, which is still there on Filbert Street. And I said, I want to get Steve Rasner to speak. And I think you kindly were generous on your honorarium. We did pay you. I know I paid you, but generous on your honorarium. We did a whole day of your awesomeness and case acceptance right in Center City. No live streams back then, no Facebook groups, no real podcast. It was just, you had to show up in person and learn for the day. My brother bought your books and CDs or tapes, and It was a fantastic day.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah, it was a great day. I remember seeing in the audience, who was Frank Matarazzo's partner?
Oh, was it Cazula? No, not Cazula. I'm not sure who it was.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think.
Dan Casula.
Dan Casula, yeah.
Yeah, and I was surprised he was at my lecture. I mean, Dan is a legend, perioprosthodontist who's since passed, but he was a legend in Philadelphia dentistry, and he was part of your audience, and I'm thinking...
Well, it all come together because him and I taught with Dr. Alex Cho and Gary Henkel for Hyacin my first implant courses. So I taught about 50 my first implant courses with the Hyacin when they came to the U.S., and Dan was part of that teaching team, and him and I were very close. Thought him as a mentor, great, amazing guy. We did it at his office right at 15th and Sansom.
Yeah,
so
I know exactly where. So tell me how, and those of you that don't know, which is probably 5 people on the planet, Paul is the, what do you call yourself? The director of a giant Facebook group called Dental Nachos. How many people do you have in that group?
I mean, we've just passed 57,000 in the Facebook group. And, as anyone is, we have our larger community now. We have over 20,000 on Instagram, which is a whole nother platform. Sometimes there's crossover, sometimes there's not. We can talk about where dentists like to hang out on. So we have probably over 70,000 people attached to dentistry paying attention to us. And I really enjoy it. It's fun. It can be frustrating. Dentist personalities can be difficult. But bringing people together to, I say, learn, laugh, and feel less alone. Those are three L's. I made a comment on a podcast with Mark Costas where I said, you can feel very lonely as a dentist even though you're surrounded by people. And he said, wow, that's very true.
Join me on October 18th and 19th for 2+ days of inspiration and real business training. This is the course that changes everything. Attendance is limited. Register now.
And we've probably all felt that because when you're in your dental office, I always say this, Steve, the dentist doesn't have anyone to hang out with at a solo GP office. The assistants hang out, the hygienists, the front desk team members, but your dentist, you're kind of on your own. So I think, I created a place for dentists to share, to learn, to laugh. So I really have enjoyed doing that.
Yeah, I find I don't know anybody like you. I mean, I don't. I mean, it's unbelievable that, I see how often you post. I went to your live event last April in Philadelphia. I saw how many people were there on a Saturday and even a Sunday. And I wonder how many hours you put into this. What I want to know first is, you're living your life. So where does Dental Nachos become born?
Yeah, I love this. I love stories like that. So it's February 2017. It was the beginning of Facebook groups. There was one called Business of Dentistry, Dental Hacks. And I like to have strong opinions. So I said, you know what, I like to contribute to those groups, but I always like to be respectful. I don't want to take over. So let me make my own group. I was sitting with my awesome wife, we call her Mrs. Nacho now. And I said, what should I call my group? And like all good ideas come from your wife. And I said, I'm a broker, I'm a speaker, I'm a dentist. Nachos are meant to be shared. They can get messy. You do it with friends. I also worked at a Mexican restaurant in Mercer County, New Jersey called Casa La Pita. And I love Mexican food. I love El Vez. I love El Rey. So I thought all these toppings come together
Okay.
and took on I remember what his metaphor of more fun in dentistry, right? I mean,
Yeah.
in the beginning, Steve, I don't know if you remember, people were just posting pictures of their nachos they were eating, which had this unintended effect of people stopping their scroll, because I always say nachos are the golden retriever puppies of appetizers. Everybody wants to stop and look at them.
Yeah.
So that was where I thought there'd be 1,000 people in it. I thought maybe I could, talk about implants, practice management, finding jobs, and I never knew it would turn into this.
Yeah. So you opened it up when? Tell me again. February.
February 2017 was the beginning.
Okay. And then when did it? I mean, it's 57,000 plus the 20,000 in Instagram.
Well, I'll share this. In 2018, I was taking an Uber back from an implant course in Delaware, and I had a meeting on the phone with Aldana Ambler. Aldana Ambler is the business coach of one of my coaches, Carol Kivler. And Carol Kivler, sadly, my dad passed away in 2016. There was a lot of stress with that. I was brokering practices. I was running this Facebook group, and my coach said, Paul, I'm worried about you. It seems like you have, too much going on. And I showed her my little P&L from speaking and doing these things. And she goes, oh, wow, that's, $100,000. Maybe you have a business. Just so you know, I didn't make $100,000 in profit. It was just total.
Yeah.
And I met Aldana Ambler, and she was the one who really said, this is how you can turn it into a business. You should have hired 2 full-time people 6 months ago. So she gave me the playbook, unlike dentistry where the playbook, operatories, hygienists, active patients. So it was a true startup. I hired 2 people with my personal savings. And
what was your, okay, because I mean, you got past the showing the food online. What was your, what were you going after?
I would describe it like a Mr. Rogers neighborhood for dentists, because this is my line. I was walking on Broad Street, and you have nacho swag. So this will help anyone who owns a shirt or sweatshirt that says Dental Nachos, because you could be somebody who was one time fishing with a nacho shirt on, Steve, and they shouted down, what is Dental Nachos? So I was on Broad Street, and someone said, what is Dental Nachos? I said, that's a great question. A lot of people ask me that. Dental Nachos is like a Mr. Rogers neighborhood for dentists, because dentists are really good at being nice to patients, but not so good at being nice to each other. And we look to fix that.
And why do you, and I know that's a theme. And look, all of you guys that follow me each week, we get intense. I've had Leah Rowling on here, and we've talked about balancing and trying to avoid burnout and stuff. And I think it is important to give yourself a break once in a while. And certainly, you're right, Paul. I mean, I think one of the most challenging things about being in dentistry is that by definition, it is an isolated business. Like, you go into your into your office that you worked hard to create. You have that staff that you selected and now nurtured, and have leadership, hopefully, of that team. But you are, unless you're in a group practice, a lot of us are alone. And you can become intoxicated by your own opinions of things. Like, you don't even know, really, sometimes, if you're doing your best or if you're functioning at the level, right?
Yeah, well, totally. I mean, one thing I can share, I credit a lot to my multiple year general practice residency I did at Albert Einstein, because I was the chief resident and I got to see how the hospital worked. And, we can put aside all the challenges with medicine from a business model, but from a training model, they have doctors follow around bigger, stronger doctors. They learn from each other. They're not threatened when someone gives them advice. I'll just use an example. I posted on Dental Nachos, should dental schools still teach amalgams? I actually think it's a great question, right?
Yeah.
Do most offices even have an amalgamator? When these people get out of dental school, will they place them? So I said, you know what? Should they redirect some of that time where they learned amalgams into something different? You would have thought some of the ways the dentist reacted, amalgam is still the best restorative material anyone's ever seen on earth, because they get threatened when people challenge their ideas because they work alone. And my whole goal was to bring these uncomfortable conversations. My friend Mark, always says, uncomfortable conversations lead to growth, to a place where we could talk about it. I always say, Dental Nachos rules, Steve, you can challenge ideas, you can't attack people. And I think it comes from that dental school Hunger Games mentality. They make people compete over who can wax up the best tooth, who can make the best bite rim, who can memorize how the kidney works the best. And they leave out all the real skills that you teach. And I strive to be like you, that I call your dentisting core, your word skills, your mind skills, your heart skills. Did you ever take a leadership course in dental school?
No.
There was no, and when you get out of the dental school, the name of the game is leadership. And that's for associate dentists too. You got to be the leadership in your operatory with the assistant and the patient. So my whole goal with Dental Nachos is to fill in the gaps of what dental school leaves out, and then also have people become friends with each other, and make it a little less of a lonely place out there.
I notice on, you have a lot of posts that are like, could be I don't know, they're heartfelt, they're anonymous
Yeah.
often, they're heartfelt, they're sad stories and stuff like that. I mean, how deep do you go with these people?
I strive to be as responsible as possible. There's a great piece, someone who's a pro speaker like you, How to Speak by Patrick Winston, has 17 million YouTube views. He was an MIT professor teaching college students how to present themselves for a job. But the content's amazing. He always says, build a fence around your idea, stay in your lane. So I stay in my lane. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm not a dental focused attorney. So I strive to always get people the right resources, whether they're business resources, coaching resources, but I want to be there for them. I want the community to be there for them. And the cool thing is we have this community effect. There's people who've met each other out there in the real world that I've never met, that because of Dental Nachos, they went to the same CE course. So, and then getting into the right
do you
place.
get like a day?
I'd say about between 50 and 60 some days, and it could be over 1,000 comments. So, it's a vibrant group. Everybody, I didn't have my biceps and EBITDA shirt. I was going to wear my EBITDA shirt here, but I have a T-shirt I made, biceps and EBITDA, focus on growing them. Everybody's Facebook group is a little bit.
You have a rap or what?
Yeah.
Oh my God. You're like a rapper just talking normally.
I appreciate it. I've known early on in Dental Nachos, there was a marketing guy who saw the group and said, "What you're doing is amazing with nachos." I said, "What am I doing?" He goes, "Your level of engagement is off the charts. The amount of time people are talking and communicating and being there." So I'm proud that the engagement level is that people feel comfortable sharing. There's friction that happens and that they get answers. One cool story, Encore Gupta, you would like this, Steve. His patient was in the chair and his implant screw broke. And he went into his room and he toast on Dental Nachos, "What should I do?" And they gave him the answer while the patient was in the chair. And so I thought that was just like the coolest thing ever, right? Like I say, a friend in your phone, right? We need friends in our phone. You hit the nail on the head. You're practicing by yourself. Stuff goes sideways. Who do you ask? And then the heartfelt stories. There's some messed up things happening to dentists out there, especially the newest ones, finding jobs, how they're treated. So I'm striving to be part of the solution that hopefully dentistry had needed for a while, where dentists are coming together and truly sharing because they care.
I really am interested, and I want you to share with my viewers your concept, but I don't want you to do it quite yet, on treatment planning your career for success. So Paul's got these 4 steps. Like, what do? You graduate dental school. What are the steps, in his opinion anyway, and he deals with thousands and thousands of, I would say, young dentists too. What's his opinion anyway? So we're going to get to that in just a second. What is, do you just still do live events? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I do. My main one is Super Dentist Boost Camp. We have that every August. I bring dentists from around the country into what I consider to be a live studio audience. And we have all kinds of speakers. I want to have you do that one year, where they present on business, they present on clinical skills, they present on self-confidence, and then we live stream it. So I always was a big fan of this, live studio audience, but then also live streaming it to Earth. I started in 2018, and I got a nice message from a mom in Kansas who said, "You know what, Paul, I'm not a new dentist, but I've let some of my skills go. Thanks so much for producing this content for us to learn from our phone." So I do one live event. I'm down to one live event a year, though. Live events are not easy. You know that game. So there's a lot of work and stress putting live events together. So I'm going to do my one a year.
So talk about what I just brought up a few minutes ago, about your concept. You call it treatment planning your career for success. Talk to me about that.
Sure. Well, I mean, if I paint the picture, we both went to Penn. So what did you do at Penn? You got a patient, you sent them to the perio department, and they never came back, right? And that was the end of that. And I'm just joking a little bit, but we talked about phases of treatment planning as what we do in our with patients: caries control, perio, restorative. So how do you take that and apply that to your career? Finding your first job after dental school. I mean, both our dads were dentists. So was your first job for your dad, Steve?
It was, yeah. Um,
And
it's because
same
I
with me.
didn't get any GPRs offers
And,
because I was in the bottom of my class. It's
and
not where I wanted to be, but it's where I was.
if you think about this for a second, Steve, law school, you do internships in the summer.
Hmm.
Medical school, you do rotation through hospitals. Dental school, there's not really any context for what an associate job is like. We were
Sure.
lucky enough to have dads as dentists, but my dad was a 50-year-old practice owner, right? I mean, it was great
Yeah.
having a dad as a dentist, but me going
Yeah.
after dental school, I didn't know what was it going to be like being an associate dentist in a private practice. How are the patients going to trust you? Do you want to work for a corporate group? People talk about Medicaid. So what we do is we give them the tools to make their best decision. What type of job is it? Why do they want the associate? How they'll be compensated? What type of mentorship is available to them? So we give them all the tools to be able to ask the right questions on interviews so they can find the job that's the right fit for them. I mean, you've seen it on the group. There's people making tons of money in rural locations, and that's a good fit for some people.
Yep.
Then other people want to be in Center City, Philadelphia. How do they find a job there? So I don't know what your thoughts are, but I think finding your first job is a transformative step. You went through all this training, you show up, and I got to tell you, Steve, sometimes it goes not well. It's like the implant that fails. You know, these nice young dentists get a job, and there's not enough patients. There's
Yeah.
nobody to support them.
Yeah. I was intuitive enough. I remember, seriously, I came back right out of school and I remember feeling it wasn't my father's fault, it was my fault that I'd stayed back in school. Because here I'd gone to Rutgers undergrad, then I went to Penn, and I'd been in the city, and I was up in New Brunswick, and here I am back in my hometown. Like, and a lot of people, as you know, 8 years after high school are exactly like they were 8 years in high school.
Yeah.
And they're out at the local bar drinking, and it wasn't a good feeling for me. So what I did is I got as many jobs as I could. I actually worked for, it wasn't a DSO in 1980, but it would have been one by today's standards. It was a mill. It was on Market Street, and I bet you know who it was. And I worked there one day a week, and I worked for a group practice. My dad was a solo dentist,
Yeah.
so I worked for a group practice, even though I could have been just busy in the one office with my father and probably making a lot more money just doing that. I knew intuitively to be as many situations as I could. And I also started a second practice at the shore, which failed
Okay.
because you can't start a practice being there on Thursday nights. Doesn't
That's
work.
a good point. You know what's you know, I know this is your podcast, but I think it's
Yeah.
a great value that why can't you start a practice and work somewhere else and only be there one day a week? And why can't you grow it, Steve? Like why, just be there one day a week and then grow to 2 days? That's what these young dentists say. I'm gonna do a startup 2 days a week and work somewhere else 3 days a week. What challenges did you have?
It's called availability. I mean, if you really want to start a practice, this is what I always say. You have to do here's what I say about a young dentist. You have to do whatever you have to do to let the community know that you ended up in, that you're available and who
Yes.
you are. If that means you have to work nights, 2 nights a week for the first 3 years, Fridays and Saturdays, I'm sorry. I know this isn't sexy, but it's what it is. You have to do that. You got to do uncomfortable things like join the local civic clubs. I mean it. I mean, I was such a fish out of water. I'm not the Kiwanis Lions Club kind of guy that I would do that. The Better Business Bureau. And you got to put yourself out there. And you're going to have nights on a Wednesday night when you first open up where two of your three people cancel that are scheduled from 6 to 8. And it's certainly going to happen to you on Saturdays if it's a nice weather day. But honestly, that's what you have to do. And I don't think it's a big ask because if you watch, and all of you know, have colleagues that are medical students, they work 100 hours a week, right?
I think one thing that you're sharing great value, but what I'll share as someone who, runs this community and hears these stories is that I've graduated dental school 2002. When did you graduate, Steve?
80.
80. The ones graduating now, and I don't find this difficult, they don't know they signed up for that, right? They don't know that they signed up for this entrepreneurial lifestyle. They think, oh, dentists always get jobs, everybody needs a dentist. So there's a lot of mismanaged expectations, and you're sharing. If you want to be a practice owner, you have to do those things.
Yeah.
It's a 24/7 thing. The one thing I'll share too, just for your listeners, is there are plenty of associate jobs where they need a full-time associate, whether it be a DSO or private practice, where you can kind of check out at 5 p.m. if you want, if that's
Sure.
the fit for you.
I was talking about being a practice owner.
Yeah, no, but your share is great. It's that's why I try to do compare and contrast. I mean, I just talked to a female dentist. He's like, I work 3 days a week, Paul. I make $300,000 a year. You know, I like my job. Should I go buy a practice? I'm like, I don't know, maybe not. Sounds pretty good, right?
Right.
So what's cool and what's inspiring is the career paths as we move along to this have become creative and interesting and part-time and full-time and DSO. But you got to pay attention early, or else you could be stuck you stuck after dental school, unemployed. One thing I'll share on this podcast is there are more unemployed dentists than anyone knows. They just don't post on Facebook and nobody keeps track of them. But they're in my phone saying, I can't find a job. I got fired from my job. I had to leave my job. It doesn't mean that 50% are unemployed. Don't write me any angry emails. It just means that there's more unemployed dentists than dentists who graduated years ago. Think about. Yeah.
And I do, man. I agree with you. I think the challenges for the last 5 to 7 years of dentist out of school, maybe it's even longer than that, are so much greater than, I told you, I had 4 jobs. I literally remember every day was a different day for me. Philadelphia one day, the Shore, the group practice I alluded to. And I have a lot of energy, so it was no problem. And again, I was doing that for 2 reasons. To figure out as best I could with my own sense of skill back then, what do I want to do? You know, am I okay being in a solo practice, which I ended up doing until I acquired associates and hired associates. Do I want to be in a group practice right out the bat? You know, I wasn't so committed that I was even going to stay in Bridgeton with my dad, to be honest with you. I didn't know what I wanted. But today's, one of the things that we're talking about is that the ascent of DSOs and corporate dentistry has really changed the picture for a lot of young dentists. You know,
100%. Also, the pandemic. So there's 2 things: clinical skills and case acceptance. You got to know what you're doing with reps, and you got to get patients to say yes to it. Through no fault of their own, the dentists who've graduated from dental school from 2020 to 2023 got fewer clinical reps than past dentists. Dental schools fell down on the job, not all of them, too many of them, and they graduated. There's someone here in Philadelphia who just finished 1 year as a resident, right? She's dentistry's a second career for her. She's great. She said, I went to dental school. I didn't do 1 crown on a patient start to finish. So her dental school had, you can insert this crown, you can do this implant bridge. So too many of these students, Steve, are graduating without the reps they need to be able to perform. And when you're in private practice or DSO, you got to perform. You can't do a 3.5-hour crown. You can't do a class 2 that doesn't work. It's you know, whatever you want to call it, showtime or game time.
So what do you advise? I mean, somebody that listens to me, or somebody that's tuning into you on this particular podcast, what would you tell that dentist? I wouldn't even know where to begin.
So in the treatment plan in their career, it would be, whether it's our friend and sponsor Link Harris, work on your fundamental skills. Too many times these new dentists, and I love that all of these Instagram courses are out there, they take a course on full mouth veneers and they can't do a single crown. And they come back and go, that was a waste of time and money. I said, yeah, it was a total waste of time and money. So I'd say fundamental things, extractions like you teach, surgical extractions, fundamental restorative dentistry, crowns, because when someone like me and my brother hire someone, we already have a surgical prosthodontist doing the all-on-4s. We already have an endodontist coming in. We need someone to go to a hygiene exam, diagnose 2 crowns, and then just go and do them. You know, I don't like bread and butter because that bread and butter, you know, makes you, I don't think, no one eats bread and butter anymore. Do you come home, Steve, and put a big giant loaf of bread on your table and butter and say, let's get after it? So I like to call it kale and quinoa dentistry. They need fundamental stuff, you know? And I think that work on surgical extractions and then work on your communication skills, right? It's working on how you present yourself. I mean, it's all the awesome things you teach, how you make people feel when you walk in the room, how you answer questions. Um,
Yeah.
you know, so that's why these first job things, even though we spent so much time talking about it, is so key, because there's too many new dentists who are demoralized by the career of dentistry just because of their first job. And it's poignant because not all dentistry is like that. But if you went to a restaurant in Philadelphia and the first two stunk, Steve, you might not want to eat in Philly anymore. I mean, that
Well,
would never
you
happen
know
in our
what?
city.
What I was going to say to you, and what I would say to my audience on this particular podcast with Paul Goodman is, I, I'll be honest with you, I was not as acutely aware of what he's pointing out with very young dentists, especially during the COVID years. I would say this, you might have said this a minute ago when you cut out. Don't don't judge this profession by the first year or two. You owe it to yourself. I think you do. You put 4 years of college. You could have done a lot of other things. Hell, I
Yeah.
thought at one time I was going to be a lawyer. I mean it. Or I even considered grad school in psychology because I was an undergrad major in psychology. I wasn't sure I was going to be a dentist, but that is the route you and I took. It's the route
Yeah.
Dr. Goodman took. You owe it to yourself. Don't make a total judgment based on the first year, two or three. What I would do is I would invest. I tell, and not because I have a institute. You don't have to come to my institute. I'd love to, but
Yeah.
that's not why I'm saying this. I would invest in what you think you're interested in dentistry and get the basics down. I mean, Spear has a great um, center out in Arizona. It's not inexpensive. I'm not telling you to take all the courses, but take some courses because if that doesn't inspire you, I mean, I'm a 44-year clinician, and I still get inspired when I take a course. I do.
Yeah.
I come back, I take a course on occlusion. I take a course on surgery. Even though I have a lot of surgical skills, I feel different when I get out of the course. I feel different because I'm also commingling with the other people in the course live.
Yeah. Well, that's the key too. When you go to face CA, and both of us do online content, you get inspired by hold on, you can't be on.
You can
Sorry.
bring me in.
There's no, she's gonna you get inspired by your colleagues. You know what you get inspired by, Steve?
What?
You get inspired that they have the same problems as you. You get inspired they have the straight. It's exactly like new parents. I described one of my classic lines is I'm walking around Philadelphia with my daughter on my shoulders,
Yeah.
and some older couple looks at me and says, "Young man, enjoy those days. Those days are the best days of your life." And I go, "Oh, thank you. How old are your kids?" They say 40. I say, "Do you wish they were 4 again?" They say, "God, no." Right? What a weird way to describe the best times of life. And being a dentist, Steve, is like having a 4-year-old as your career. Parts are awesome. Parts are aggravating. They're all exhausting. And when you go to face-to-face, if anything comes from this podcast, go to more face-to-face CE, not just to learn what's on stage, but to be inspired by your colleagues, not because their crown preps are perfect, but because they have the same stresses as you and you can work them out together. I mean, I couldn't think of a better message.
Yeah, that is a beautiful message. I'm glad you said that. I mean, I want to make that really clear. Don't judge it based on what you see on Instagram. I mean it, or what you see on even Facebook, because there's a reason there's a lot of studies out there that tell you too much time on your phone is not good for you. And it's not good for a young dentist because you're comparing yourself to things that you're not even sure are real, by the way. When you see a podium case at a lecture, you don't know if the crown on number 8 went back to the lab 4 times to make it look perfect so you look really good from the stage. A lot of dentists, I struggle sometimes. I absolutely do. Like, I'll be flying along doing work and feeling so good about myself. And then I'll run into a case I did, and I'll look at the date. I must have done this 15 years ago, and I did it 5 years ago or 4 years ago. Everybody has bad days. Everybody makes poor decisions. The important point is to be accountable and improve from them. And that's just the honest truth.
And I think, Steve, what you're saying is so key. Apply this to treatment planning your career too, right?
Yeah, go
If
ahead.
you get it, not so great job, get a different job after that. Try different types of practices. But what's tough about dentistry, Steve, is this is one of the challenging parts. I don't know if there's enough jobs for all the dentists graduating from dental school. They're
Really?
making more dental schools, and the insurance game, to me, has had a lot of practice owners not growing, not wanting to bring in associates. So I think that that's a big challenge, and that's why there's a struggle for a lot of these new grads to find their footing. And I think the C courses, why don't you start your C course now at the Rasner Institute? It's a perfect place to meet people to find your next associateship. Go to a C course and talk to a dentist older than you and say, I want to help you. Because there's one thing that's 100%, Steve. This is 100%. People say this thing, nothing's 100%. I've never met a dentist who's gone from 4 to 3 days, ever want to go back to 4. 3 to 2 days, ever want to go back to 3. So dentists, when they get that associate and you become a big part of their life, it's gold. You can do the cases they don't want to do anymore. You can learn from them. I just wish there was more of these, what do I want to call them? Healthy owner-associate relationships out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, because you made me think of that. To every young dentist out there listening to this particular podcast, maybe you tuned in by accident. I don't know. Don't judge even your first associateship by whoever, if it's not a good one, because not everybody's like that. I'm telling you, I have 6 instructors at the Rasner Institute, and I know Paul, and I know a plethora of other, hundreds of dentists that are seasoned that really do care about the future of dentistry. And they're really good people that do care about nurturing a new associate along. I literally know these people. And now, of course, they can't hire everybody, but I'm sure it's not unique to just a couple. You just have to keep looking, because listen, let's just be honest, Paul. There's a lot of miserable dentists too. And
Yeah.
they can't turn it off when they hire that new associate. So you may be, for a less, not the greatest word, a victim of being hired by somebody you didn't see it coming. And that's not good for your head. And dentistry is hard enough without that.
And I'll say this, Steve, maybe there's some value both for the owners and associates. What drives me nuts is I go, hey, you should use my platform, Dentist Job Connect, to hire an associate, Dr. Steve, because you need one. You go, oh, my best friend's brother goes to dental school, so I'm just going to hire them. I go, don't you want as many options as possible for one of the most important things in your life? So whether you're finding a job or hiring an associate, get as much context as possible. There's a great dentist I connected last year with the Eagles team. He applied to 40 jobs, Steve, not 40.
Okay.
He went on like 20 interviews and he found a great fit for him. And know what he said that was gold? Every interview I went on, I learned something. I learned what I didn't want out of a job.
Sure.
He went and observed at these practices. So for some reason, I don't know if I want to call it laziness, Steve, dentists are not as meticulous with their business and career decisions as they are with their crown preps. And I think that's what causes some of this misery. Get as many options as possible for this stuff.
Yeah, and I'm going to echo it. I don't want to be redundant, but maybe I am. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to go to work like I told you, out of the 4 places I worked for in my first 2 years, I ended up staying with myself. I became a solo practitioner. My father retired, and that was my road. I assure you, had he been miserable and I was in a practice where the patients he had were good patients, and they valued doing the type of dentistry I wanted to do. My skills weren't good enough, that's for sure. So I started seeking CE as soon as I could. But I'm saying, you always hear people saying, I say it all the time, find out what you want to do and do it, because the career goes faster than you want it to. That said, you do have a lot of time in those first 5 years to figure it out. You do.
Yeah.
And if your life's not over if you picked the wrong associateship, so what? Then you're going to get out of it.
And I'll add to this, Steve, ask dentists. There's so many good tools you can give to your listeners. Ask dentists in your area where you want to work, hey, could I come for half a day and observe at your practice? I'll bring the team lunch and see what you do. You know how many dentists would love to have that? Just learn about this profession before you jump in. Do that as a D1. Do that as a D2. First of all, when you're in dental school, everyone feels bad for you. Leverage that. I always say that. I remember bridesmaid Kristen Wiig came up to first class and said, help me, I'm poor, right? When you're a dental student, say, I'm just a dental student. I'm in so much debt. Nobody cares after you graduate from dental school. They don't feel bad for you. So if you're a dental student listening, leverage that everyone feels bad for you and say, I got one Temple student coming to my practice in the next month.
I've had many.
So
yep.
Go and see what's out there, because it's a wild career. And that especially goes true, Steve, for buying your first practice. Because are you going to buy an insurance one, start one from scratch, fee for service? I mean, I actually say, Steve, and I mean, you can challenge me on this in a friendly way. Buying your first dental practice is the biggest decision of your career and or life. I'll explain. I've been a transitions broker, and I've met dentists at the end of their careers, and they've had multiple houses. They've had multiple spouses, one dental practice. They have, for reasons that are poignant, tragic, difficult, they have spouses have been divorced, or they have moved across they've had people move away or change houses. It's still that one practice. So to me, and you're a perfect example of it, you still have the same practice from what year did you start it?
It's 44 years.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
that should tell your listeners, I've been in one practice. I mean, we bought a second practice, but where you pick to be a practice owner and buy a practice is such a life-defining moment. I mean, you could either challenge me or agree, but I just wanted to say,
Yeah, I also think it's what you make of your life too. I mean, honestly, I've never said this, I don't think live to anybody. I'm in South Jersey. It's a nice area, but if I had choices, I might have gone to San Diego or some weather thing, which I wasn't thinking of when I was 24 years old, a better part of the country that had better growth potential. But I'm not the kind of guy that feels sorry for himself. So I always try to make lemonade out of a lemon. I mean, I know, sorry for the cliche, but sometimes you have to make something better than it actually is. And if it's wearing you down, then you have to make big boy decisions, right?
I mean, I think I'm on the same page with you. I am like you, look for the positive. I'm just sharing that owning a dental practice is so complex. Untangling yourself from it is difficult. So if
Yeah.
someone says, like, it's not easy to pick up and move to San Diego. I mean, people say dentistry has a lot of autonomy. The yes and part is yes, and it's very hard to move to a different state after you bought a dental practice,
Yes.
right? I mean, so hopefully someone's sitting there saying, I want to make sure the place where I decide to become a practice owner is one where I want to be for the next few decades. And like you said, make the most of it. But it's something they definitely don't talk about enough in dental school.
What about, let's flip the coin and probably end up here.
Sure.
What is selling your practice look like to a guy? There may be somebody, a bunch of dentists in their 50s or whatever. I don't know. Even what you're saying. Maybe
Yeah.
they opened up. I remember when at one of my early courses with Spear or Coys, and there was this young, sharp female dentist that would come down from this really remote area of Canada. And she had mad skills, but she was in such a remote area that her practice wouldn't grow. And I
Yeah.
remember the group advice to her, and she was like 5 years in. So she had this vision. She was Canadian. She had this vision of locating by a lake. I don't know, she was up by polar bears and stuff. I don't know. And the group advice was sell your practice and give yourself a better chance to succeed, because she loved dentistry and she couldn't grow there. And
It's a great, I mean, one thing about rural locations, they can come with a lot of opportunities, but also a lot of challenges, where she probably was. And I'm sure that advice was hard for her to hear, but good ones. I mean, selling your practice these days has become, there's many options. People
yeah,
sell to DSOs. If your practice is collecting more than $1.5 million a year, DSOs will be interested in hearing about your practice for sale.
what
There's
was
so
that
many
number?
I said 1.5 million or more,
Okay.
right? 1.5 million or more. So if you're listening saying my practice does 800,000, that could be great too. It's more for private practice buyers. So then if you have buyers saying, oh my gosh, DSOs are buying all the practices, that's not true. There's plenty of practices that do less than 1.5 million where you can be financially successful, rewarding. You just have to, that's the time you have to extra pay attention. Go to seed courses, talk to older dentists. But these different ways, now there's, you're familiar with these models. There's partnership organizations that look like DSOs, but also have the practice owner who partners with them keep a portion of their practice equity inside of this DSO. So now you're involved in a whole new business venture. And I know you know this well. And for some people, that's perfect. For other people, they have no desire to work 5 more years, 3 more years, no desire to do it. So I think if one thing I can share about selling your practice, you want to start the process earlier than you think. You know what I want to share if we have a few more minutes,
Yeah,
Steve?
we do.
Dental specialists make really good career decisions. And this is why. I'll tell you a story. During the pandemic, a pediatric dentist said, Paul, I want to sell my practice. During the pandemic, she came to my course 2 years earlier. I will never forget her. And she said, Paul, I'm going to want to do this. I should learn about this. I should learn about it.
Wow. Yeah.
So she came early and we sold her practice for the asking price and successful, but she had prepared. And I think dental specialists, because they're used to following around bigger, stronger dentists, pediatric dentists, they go, man, life is harder than it looks. I better pay attention. I better research things. And I better do things in ways that make sense. This is not, I'm a general dentist. This is not to say anything negative about general dentists, but I just think specialists get trained in this. I need a system. So I think you need to start 5 years earlier than you think, have a conversation with brokers who are responsible. Prepare your practice too. I mean, when we were moving, when I was an 8-year-old kid, Steve, I saw my mom, putting up new wallpaper, and I saw my dad doing landscaping. I go, why are we doing this? We're moving. They go, well, so it looks nicer to the other people buying it. So if you have a practice where you have to kick the delivery unit 3 times to get it started, make sure it looks nice, right? I mean, nobody wants to make your practice look how you would want to buy it. There's too many of these tired practices that aren't keeping up with the times. This does not mean go out and buy a CEREC tomorrow to make it more attractive. It just means that if you're in the selling mode, keep your practice serviceable and up to date so that it's attractive. Then, in a poignant way, I deal with life transitions where people injured, sudden death, leave their family in the lurch. So, selling your dental practice, it's very complex. You need a dentist who works in that state who wants to buy your practice. So hopefully I've inspired somebody over the age of 40 to start the process of thinking about this and getting themselves on board.
You're reminding me that it's the opposite too. I'm going to share a story I don't think anybody I've ever shared. When you go to buy a practice, and you alluded to this in the podcast already, it is critical. I know you get the hunger and you get the passion. Oh, I want my own practice. You've got to put in the homework. Let me tell you a story about the great Steve Rasner. I had an amazing, I still do, practice right here where I'm working right now in Southern New Jersey. And I live in Philadelphia. And because I lived there at that point for 10 years, this is about 6 years ago, I thought, what the heck? I'll open up a practice in Philly. So I did. Guess where I opened up, Paul?
I don't know where.
Because it was for sale in the Medical Arts Building. Okay? On
yeah.
16th Street.
I know it well.
Yeah. Steve Rasner goes and buys a practice on 16th Street in the Medical Arts Building. Well, guess what? Guess how many dentists are in the Medical Arts Building?
Yeah,
like 30. And they all been there 25 years. And I don't know. I look back. Remember I said, don't be so hard on yourself. You're going to make mistakes. I don't know what I was thinking. And guess what else? The dentist that I purchased sent all of his patients to a periodontist 2 floors up to do the thing that I know how to do the best, implants. So I thought, goody.
Yeah.
I won't have to do that. They'll come to me. They wanted to go to the guy they've been going to, the dentist I purchased had sent them to for 30 years. I couldn't overcome 30 years of loyalty to the periodontist.
I love that you're sharing that, and I totally get it. I want to do something like that. I did have my dental focused attorney friend, Rob Montgomery, one time I wanted to buy a practice in Fishtown because I thought it was cool 10 years ago. And he's like, Paul, this is a bad idea. And you need people like that. As we wrap up, you need people in your life who you go to and you trust and say, do you think this is a good idea? And who I went to, he said, it's not a good idea. And I listened to him, Steve, because he explained his why, right? It wasn't a dramatic story. I said, oh, Rob, I want to buy this cool practice, build up in Fishtown. He goes, why do you want to do that, Paul? It's not going to grow like the way you want. You're going to get distracted. He was 100% right. And one of the things, maybe we can do another podcast one day.
Sure.
What you described there is patient dynamics. Patient dynamics. You, even though you were a seasoned dentist and you didn't know those patient dynamics before you bought it, and they weren't willing to leave that periodontist and come see you, which is not something I would have thought of either. So patient dynamics of a practice transition is so key and can make or break the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to romanticize in your brain that, I'll go to Philly and I'll be big in Philly. It doesn't work that way. You got to do your homework. So
totally.
I always ask my guest, Paul, when we leave, is what words of wisdom, which you have many, especially for young dentists. What do you call young dentists, by the way? What's your
Well,
acronym?
I have all these. I have baby age dentist bad, medium age dentist mad, seasoned age dentist sad. It's based on how many years you've been a dentist. Bad, mads, and sads, and I say
What
them
would you
all in the
say
most.
to the bad, mads, and sad? Your younger self. What would your younger Paul? What would you tell your younger self, Paul Goodman, in 2024? How would you
I,
tell him what the best road is?
I would say, look to. We care so much about making our patients smile. Look to make actually other dentists smile. We all love when we get a great Google review about our practice. So whether you're online or you're in person, we are starving for great job, Dr. Steve. So glad you shared that. I learned a lot from you. And that could be done on a Facebook group, a simple, like, that's an interesting case. I've never had one like that. To my real advice is, I've said this all the time, ask a dentist in your town out to lunch for no reason at all. Call up them and say, hey, let's just go out to lunch together. Magic will happen. They might have hygienists that you want, that not want, a hygienist you could work with. They may need an associate. They may sell their practice. But at the end of the day, you just meet someone like you.
Join me on October 18th and 19th for 2+ days of inspiration and real business training. This is the course that changes everything. Attendance is limited. Register now.